Hello, welcome to the What If seminar series from the Center for Innovation and Population Health in beautiful downtown Lexington, Kentucky. So we're happy that you're here, happy that you have joined us. As you know, or maybe you don't, that we focus on intersectional work. And so like last time we had the intersection between horse and human. This What If seminar is about the intersection between the academy and the community. And so we're really, really excited to welcome Margaret McGladrey, along with her colleagues, to talk about community research. Dr. McGladrey is an assistant professor here at the University of Kentucky, and her journey started in Oregon as an undergraduate. She was an Oregon Duck, and then she became a Kentucky Wildcat, where she got her PhD in sociology, and then she moved down to be at the University of South Florida, which I think their nickname has to do with bulls. So actually, I was thinking about the three animal mascots for Margaret, and they kind of capture her and her personality. Ducks are resilient, right? That everything just rolls off their back, right? Wildcats are passionate, and there are very few more passionate researchers than Margaret McGladrey. And bulls are persistent and assertive. So I think that's Margaret. And so it's really a pleasure. She does a lot of good work around how do you engage communities in science, and how do you then inform communities from science. And so she's joined by two colleagues. One is Jennifer Gully from Clark County Department of Health. And for those of you who don't know, Clark County is just east of Lexington. Winchester is the county seat. It runs from Lexington all the way to Rabbittown. So, and then also Stacy Lee, who's joining us from the beautiful New Orleans. She's at Tulane University. So, Margaret, thank you for joining us. We look very much forward to hearing what you have to say about your work with communities. And thank you.
Thank you so much, John. And that's like the best intro ever, a bio through school mascots. It makes me think of the comedian, Josh, I think Adams is his name, who does different kinds of satires of school mascots. So thanks for that send up there. So I'm so pleased to have with me today, as John said, Jennifer Gully and Stacy Lee. Jennifer Gully is a Master of Public Health, BSN, and an RN. She serves as a nurse and administrator, as John said, with the Clark County Health Department in Winchester, Kentucky. This year in April marked her 30th year in the public health setting. And as we were just saying before this got started, that means she probably started in public health at age 7, right? So this is the first part of her first part of her career was in home health nursing. And the last 16 years have been in various aspects of public health management, quality improvement, public health accreditation, and community planning. Since 2016, she has been responsible for the community health assessment process and improvement planning process for Clark County, as well as supporting coalition development and maintenance. So Jennifer really has a decades and decades of experience with local public health practice. And I'm also really glad to be able to introduce Stacy Lee, who, as John said, is finishing her undergraduate BSPH degree, so also a public health person at Tulane University. Stacy and I met when she was a member of the prestigious Summer Research Institute fellowship class this last summer that's funded by NIDA to provide research professional development to promising undergraduate students to launch them on their behavioral health research careers. So Stacy is currently applying for psychiatry MD programs, and as part of her study with me during this past summer, worked with the Clark County data and is going to talk to you a little bit about her research and share some of the components of the project. So without further ado, let's jump right into the presentation here. Great. So there's our title. What if a picture were worth more than 1,000 words? So we're going to talk a little bit about how that's the case with the method that we're using today. So hopefully the slides go ahead and move on to learning objectives. So that looks like it's happening. Yes, excellent. So as I said, this presentation is designed to share how a photo can be worth more than 1,000 words in the Photovoice method and in health research and human services research and practice. So along the way, we're going to translate concepts from public health practice and TCOM, which is Transformational Collaborative Outcomes Management, a person-centered helping system management and improvement approach led by the IPH Center and practiced in child welfare and behavioral health agencies around the country and the world. So it's really kind of an opportunity because folks may be chiming in from the public health world who are joining us for this webinar and or from the TCOM world. So it's really kind of an opportunity for all of us to be in conversation with each other and learn to speak kind of the similar languages, because I think as you'll see here, Photovoice is a common language that really resonates with both public health practice and what we do in TCOM. So as you see here, our learning objectives are to be able to explain the relevance of Photovoice to the CHA and CHIP practice. So when we're talking about CHAs, that's community health assessment, and CHIP is community health improvement planning and practice. Jennifer is going to give you some definitions of that later, as well as TCOM, that transformational collaborative outcomes management. Then you'll also be able to explain how the Photovoice method was integrated into the Clark County Health Department CHA-CHIP and could be incorporated into broader CHA and TCOM work. And finally, at the end of this, you'll be able to discuss how the Photovoice method can improve community engagement and collaborative initiatives in public health practice and TCOM. So on to our next slide. What is Photovoice? So regardless of the application of Photovoice, it was introduced 30 years ago by public health researchers. And I always like to claim this because Photovoice has been used by a wide variety of different disciplines and practices, but it is a core public health methodology introduced by Carolyn Wong and Marianne Burris 30 years ago. About 30 years ago, it was our first publication in health promotion practice. And their research was originally in Yunnan, China, in rural China, where women who were experiencing environmental health disparities and inequalities couldn't get their local public officials from the PRC to pay attention to what they were saying was happening in terms of water quality and the quality of their agriculture. So they developed the Photovoice method in combination with the expertise of Carolyn Wong and Marianne Burris to be able to document the realities of what they were seeing in the community from their own point of view. So what we're doing with Photovoice, regardless of what topic we're focusing on, is these three goals that you see outlined here from that original article by Wong and Burris. First, we're convening groups of participants to creatively identify community health strengths and concerns that they would like to document with their own photography. Second, we're facilitating group dialogue to critically unpack how and why communities experience health issues prioritized by the group. And then third, we're reaching decision maker audiences using exhibits and other dissemination methods to encourage social action and the adoption of health promoting policies. So Photovoice, as I said, has been applied to a lot of different kinds of contexts from architecture and urban design and social justice, but this is a core public health methodology that we are using here. And you can think about Photovoice as an empowerment methodology using Freire's critical consciousness theory. So when we think about critical consciousness from an operational perspective, we are moving folks from experiences of maybe passive adaptation to community conditions as an initial state, to emotional engagement with community conditions, to the cognitive realization of their root causes, which leads to this final stage in the critical consciousness kind of conceptual framework of intention to act to change. So we're kind of moving folks through this critical consciousness raising process through something like the Photovoice method, but there are other critical consciousness raising approaches as well. So Photovoice, in addition to having this kind of consciousness raising theoretical mechanism here, it also positions co-researchers as experts in their own lives, which can increase self-advocacy skills and self-esteem and decrease isolation and shame. So Photovoice has also been used as an anti-stigma campaign tool. Photovoice is ideal for understanding and leveraging the experiences of marginalized and or socially stigmatized groups who have unique insights on their conditions, especially related to social determinants of health, and also possibilities for health improvement that professionals may not possess. Researchers have employed Photovoice with numerous minoritized and stigmatized groups, as you see here on the slide, such as people living with HIV/AIDS, gender non-binary adults, people with mental illness, people with substance use disorders, people experiencing houselessness, and people with disabilities. And I and other colleagues have used this Photovoice method so that co-researchers can really make decisions about their levels of disclosure at every step of the process, from joining the closed Photovoice discussion groups to choosing what to photograph and deciding how to caption and present them, such that these Photovoice projects really become representations of a collective standpoint that is created and crafted from, but not individually identifiable with, personal stories. So it really is kind of this disclosure management strategy on top of all these other types of functions. And of course, this kind of collective identity that comes about as a part of Photovoice projects is a central strategy for social movements in reframing interpretive frameworks and cultural meanings for social life that they seek to influence. So using that collective standpoint as a cultural organizing tool. All right, I'll move on to the next slide. So I wanted to do a quick crosswalk here for those of you who speak the language of TCOM, comparing what we're doing with Photovoice to TCOM here. So kind of my assertion is that Photovoice can be seen as a community level assessment and outcomes management tool, complementing all of our other tools in the TCOM suite for personal and family, program and system level focus of our other TCOM tools. So what I've done here is a little bit of a crosswork here between Photovoice and TCOM. So first, that goal of recording and reflecting community strengths and concerns maps right onto our value of appropriateness and our principle of action levels for rating both needs and strengths in the TCOM framework. Second, our goal of facilitating group dialogue to critically unpack how and why communities experience health issues prioritized by the group really maps nicely onto our defining principle of collaboration in TCOM to support the development of a shared vision and consensus on joint action. Third, that goal of encouraging social action and adoption of health promoting policies lines up really nicely with our defining principle of transformational change in the TCOM framework, not just satisfaction with services as our goal with assessment and intervention. And then finally, this requirement, really the imperative for Photovoice to meaningfully engage participants in making decisions at every step of the research process, from topic selection to analysis and dissemination. This participatory ethic aligns nicely with the TCOM guiding principle that people have voice and choice in participating in and completing assessments and intervention. So one last thing here I'll say about kind of the framing of this project in terms of the literature and what we know about Photovoice as a method. What we sought to do with this design was try to improve on some of the challenges and critiques of Photovoice applications that have come up recently in the literature here. So first, what we see is a somewhat inconsistent adherence to the Photovoice method. This is from a recent 30-year review of reviews by Seitz and Orsini that you see cited here, where they've noticed that in their review of all the reviews of Photovoice projects, we read less about how research collaborators conduct data analysis, although we hear a lot about how participants are involved in the design of projects and the data gathering component. Also, we see in the literature some examples of using Photovoice with individual interviews rather than the group setting, which really kind of diminishes this collective standpoint piece that I was talking about earlier. Additionally, in the publication of findings, we see this discussion of collaborative data analysis limited to just producing the data around the photo and the captions, which really doesn't amount to participatory analysis from a kind of the ethic of Freirean kind of collaboration from the beginning to the end of the research process. So what we did with this project to try to address some of these issues is to create opportunities for participants to reflect on their original photo submissions in critical group conversation through notes and recaptioning. And you'll hear a little bit about those methods further on here. Another thing we see in the literature is an inconsistent evaluation of Photovoice outcomes and impacts. This seems kind of crazy given that like the third goal of Photovoice, as you remember, is to reach policymakers, social action, change, all this kind of thing. But what we see in the literature is that public sharing of findings to foster change is seldom discussed in detail. The predominant approach that you typically see is a public exhibition of photographs to which key stakeholders and the public are invited, but the reader is often left wondering whether stakeholders of relevance to the issue were invited, did they attend, and if so, what new knowledge and interventions they left with. Although attention is starting to be given to the audience of exhibits, we know far less about the consumption of photos than we do about making them. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to address here, and you'll hear about later, is an evaluation of the combination of process, outcomes, and impacts of the Photovoice project on our intended audiences and real or proxy changes in community conditions here. And I think one of the best ways to improve how we adhere to that third goal of Photovoice is to embed it into existing cycles of policy change and planning. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about the role of local health departments.
So what you see on this slide is the framework of the 10 essential public health services as defined by the Public Health National Center for Innovations in collaboration with the CDC. And the 10 essential public health services describe the public health activities that all communities should undertake to carry out the mission of public health, of protecting and promoting the health of all people in all communities. The 10 essential public health services fall under the 3 core functions of public health, which can be seen on the outside of this colored wheel. Those core functions are assessment, which involves understanding a community's current health status, their needs and challenges, which is key in determining how resources should be allocated. Policy development, which involves analysis of policies, development of key community partnerships, promoting and implementing evidence-based interventions. And then assurance, ensuring that the findings gathered through the assessment and the policy-related research are effectively implemented and that resources are appropriately allocated. And as you see, under each of these 3 core functions, there are essential public health services. Now, this framework was revised in 2020. Prior to 2020, research was at the center of this wheel. In 2020, equity was placed at the center. And we know that to achieve optimal health for all, we must promote policies, systems, services, and overall community conditions that seek to remove systemic and structural barriers that have resulted in health inequities, such as poverty, racism, low educational attainment, being examples. The Public Health Accreditation Board's intensive quality improvement process requires local health departments to assure the provision of these 10 essential public health services. Next slide. So Margaret has talked about a community health assessment and community health improvement plan. This is a major aspect of local public health practice. And an assessment and improvement plan are required by the Public Health Accreditation Board as part of standard public health practice. This was a recommendation by the Institute of Medicine in 1988 in their report on the status of public health across our country. The Public Health Accreditation Board defines community health assessment as a systematic examination of the health status indicators for a given population that is used to identify key problems and assets in a community. The ultimate goal of a community health assessment is to develop strategies to address the community's identified health needs and issues. A variety of tools and processes can be used to conduct a community health assessment. The essential ingredients are community engagement and collaborative participation. A community health improvement plan, or CHIP, is a long-term systematic effort to address public health problems based on the results of the community health assessment activities and the improvement planning process. A plan is typically updated every 3 to 5 years. The Public Health Accreditation Board defines a community health improvement plan. As I said, this long-term systematic effort to address public health problems on the basis of the results of the assessment activities. The plan is used by health and other governmental, education, and human service agencies in collaboration with community partners to set priorities and coordinate and target resources. It should define the vision for the health of the community through this collaborative process and should address the gamut of strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and opportunities that exist in the community to improve the health status of that community. There's evidence that routine utilization of community health assessments and improvement plans improves public health.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So just briefly here, I want to return to our crosswalk where we have those goals of Photovoice and TCOM lined up with each other. And let's add CHA-CHIP here, right? So we see this shared focus across all three of these different frameworks and approaches of determining health strengths and issues. So we're looking not only at concerns, but also that kind of asset-based approach here in all of these three of these approaches. And then CHAs and CHIPs, in addition to what we see for the prioritization of group issues and group dialogue, collaboration, and the TCOM model. In CHA-CHIPs, this priority on multi-sector collaboration and proactive, broad, and diverse community engaged dialogue, right? So it just feels like you could be reading from the same description for a lot of these in terms of the common language. Then in terms of our third goal here around social action, transformational change, CHA-CHIPs, as Jennifer said, are a systematic effort to address public health issues, not just do the assessment, but how are we actually going to make change from this collaborative approach? And then also from this perspective of meaningful engagement, voice and choice, we hear about this goal of facilitating broad stakeholder ownership of assessment and improvement planning in the CHA-CHIP process. So again, it just feels like you could be reading descriptions of each other here with TCOM, Photovoice, and the CHA-CHIP with this crosswalk. So a little bit more here about what we sought to do with this project. As Jennifer said, with the CHA process, we're doing primary data collection. This is every local health department across the country is responsible for doing primary data collection in collaboration with community stakeholders or partners to inform the prioritization of local health department policies, strategies, and interventions during the subsequent CHIP phase. And in the public health accreditation standards, measure 1.C.I, it actually specifically highlights Photovoice as an example of a primary data collection method that can help meet this requirement. So when Jennifer and I saw this and we were pulling together all the pieces, we were like, oh, this is obviously the direction that we've got to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk a little bit more about how this dream came to be and how we got the band together.
Now, I've actually worked in community health assessment and improvement planning since 2010. And in my work in another county health department, I was preparing for the community health assessment. And through my research and reading the literature, I read about this Photovoice technique and saw the products that were produced in another part of our nation from using this practice. I'm not sure it was with an assessment process, but I worked to incorporate that in the assessment, and it flopped. It just didn't produce what I had hoped that it would and what I had read about. So, I had that idea in my head, and moving forward, through the Healing Community Study, Clark County was a part of this national study, and I met Margaret through that study when Photovoice was incorporated into that project. And I actually participated as a Clark County participant in that project for that study. This just shed new light for me on the Photovoice process. And I thought, this is how it's supposed to be done. So I approached her after we completed that project and asked her about, shared my idea about incorporating it into our local assessment process. And we started the planning. So, I wanted to do something different, add a different dynamic to our assessment process to get more community involvement and engagement. I've always conducted focus groups as a part of this process. A focus group usually yields a bulleted list of strengths and weaknesses that have been identified through that discussion. And using Photovoice is just such a richer experience. So that led to this project.
Right. And would you tell us a little bit about how we got our participants to the table?
So we recruited 23 community members from Clark County to participate in the project. We organized them into 4 groups that met weekly at mutually convenient times on Zoom during the month of October last year. I reached out through various listservs, through coalition meetings, community partners, civic groups, and other local communication channels to invite members of the community to participate in this project and share their perspectives on public health more broadly through Photovoice. And then we also provided incentives for participation in the form of a Walmart gift card. This slide shows the demographics of our 23 participants. We were pleased with the demographic representation. Actually, based on our population demographics, we had a higher representation of persons of color and Hispanic individuals. And our group also, this group did end up being more educated versus what we see in population demographics. We had our Photovoice group had 96% with a high school graduate, being a high school graduate or higher, and based on population demographics, that's 89%.
Thanks, Jennifer. I will say, though, on this kind of topic, in terms of representation, it may not be totally representative of the population, but we love to see that literacy level, right, with folks with a high school degree or equivalent able to participate in a data collection effort, to be co-researchers, right? So that's another point with Photovoice as an empowerment method, is that it's different kinds of literacy that are valued. So I wanted to highlight that. And so let's follow the bouncing ball here in terms of our methodology, what we did. And I'm not sure why it looks like the formatting is doing something wonky here. So I'll just take us through the bouncing ball. So what's the orange dots? Those are our conversations that are happening in person on Zoom. So those are our live conversations. What's happening with the yellow dots is between sessions. So total here, we had 4 sessions with each of the 4 groups in October and November 2022. In that first orientation session, we went over the goals of Photovoice that you've heard about today, some ethics of photography, some important considerations about consent there, especially given what we know about the social media age and ability for folks to be able to consent to sharing identifiable images and that could be used in different kinds of ways. And then we did the development of our photo topics that we were going to work on taking photographs to represent and illustrate using a facilitation technique called the nominal group technique. And this is getting to that list of topics that Jennifer talked about as the usual product of a focus group. So basically, everyone was asked to first think about, given what we know about Photovoice and the goals of this project around the CHA-CHIP in informing the CHA-CHIP process, what are the most important community health strengths and what are the most important community health concerns to photograph and document and tell the story of? So in response to the first question, gave people a few moments of silence to write their own bullet pointed lists. Then we round robined around until we got all of the topics that folks had on their individual lists onto the whiteboard, onto the screen share. Did the same thing with the concerns list. So at the end of that orientation session, we have kind of the products of your typical focus group session. And so that's also a kind of a research product and a piece of the data collection that the health department was able to use. But that wasn't it, right? People went and took photographs to represent what those topics meant for them between the sessions, and then sent them back to my research assistant, Marissa Booty, who is not able to be with us today, but she collaborated with us with the actual data collection, and put those together into a slideshow, a kind of show and tell, where when we got back together for the photo discussion sessions, the first photo discussion session focused on strengths, the second on the concerns topics. We started off with a show and tell and asked people to talk about, what are we seeing in these photos? Where did you take them? And why did you connect them to the topic? So after the show and tell, we use the showed method here to unpack 3 key prompts with the showed method. One is, given what we're seeing from each of your individual points of view, angles of vision, how common are these issues to other people like you in Clark County? right? So that's one, kind of the prevalence question, to use public health language. Second question, this is my favorite, the why question. What are the root causes? And inviting community members to be theorists and explainers of their lived experiences is really powerful to hear how they connect those dots. And then finally, we talked about, okay, given everything we've learned from each other, what do we need to do to address these issues, and who needs to be at the table? Coming up with some of our action plans that you'll hear an example of later. So that was the flow of those two photo discussion conversations. And in the meantime, Marissa was furiously taking notes and pulling those together into a diagram using the 5 levels of the socio-ecological model and organized under 3 big themes per conversation. So Jennifer, Marissa, and I worked on these kind of rapid analysis, thematic analysis notes documents that we then brought back to the participants to review at the beginning of each session to help facilitate that participatory analysis I was talking about earlier that had been lacking in Photovoice methods in the past. And so by the time we get to that final analysis and action planning session, when we're looking at all the photos, they're able to reflect on not only what we're seeing with these photos and maybe their original captions, but all of those notes organized thematically. What do we want to capture in terms of the caption to create that kind of context there? And Jennifer, you always tell this story about the idea of how important those captions are and the group experience in crafting them in terms of what you've seen with another Photovoice project where there's a picture of a kid's school lunch, right? And without a caption next to that, is that with a kid's school lunch, is that photo illustrating, oh, we're so happy with our school's nutrition program, or, oh my goodness, we can't believe that this is what our kids are getting every day, right? You've got to have that caption, the combination of the photo and the caption that's collaboratively generated through this analysis process. So we're going to see some examples of that next. Okay, but before we get to those examples, to talk a little bit about the community forum, this is a typical part of any of the CHA processes where the community comes together to review all that primary and secondary data that Jennifer and her team have been hard at work at, including the Photovoice work. So we were fortunate enough that one of our participants was actually a graphic designer who's done a lot of graphic design for community organizations in Clark County. So she put together for us an amazing poster and postcard template that we were able to use. You see an example of one of those posters off to the side here, where the light colored tiles represent the strengths that the group wanted to illustrate, the top 3 strengths, and the darker tiles represent community health concerns. So at the November 30th forum, representatives from each of the 4 groups presented their top 3 community health concerns and top 3 community health strengths that they had come to consensus on from their, oh, and I wrote down the number of these. We have 112 photos that were taken and submitted by participants, yielding 89 photo and quote combinations. So the prioritization work was its own form of analysis. What do we want to surface and elevate as the most important? And the forum included exhibits with the display posters like you see at the right here, as well as postcards that audience members could take home with them. And you've got a link on the website to the website that Jennifer's team developed for hosting all of those different products here. So Stacy has been living with these data in and out, doing the analysis work. So she's going to tell you about examples of some of the work of one of the groups. And this was group 4 is what they were called as we were organizing the groups. So when they decided on what their names wanted to be, they went with the Star Wars reference of May the 4th be with you. So that's where their name came from here that you're going to hear from. So take it away, Stacy.
So here you're seeing the work of that May the 4th Be With You Photovoice group, which included 3 team members. This slide represents one of the 3 most important health strengths that they chose to highlight from their research, which is resources working together to meet community needs, as we see here with Heritage Park providing a versatile community gathering place. They say neighborhood parks in our community have provided space for play and for community events such as movie nights, celebration of holidays, and as gathering places. Our parks are a strength for our community, and additional resources dedicated to parks and recreation would permit increased benefits from this strength. This slide is the second of the 3 most important health strengths that they chose to highlight. Resources working together at Clark County Community Services to address critical basic needs. They say Clark County Community Services provides multiple services. In addition to operating a thrift store, they provided food assistance, including the Senior Commodities Program, housing assistance, and several other services. And here is the third of the most important health strengths that they chose to highlight, resources working together to create community spaces that are accessible in terms of transportation and what children of all abilities need. They say the playground at Legacy Grove is accessible to children of all abilities. The park is located within easy walking distance from several neighborhoods. Legacy Grove also provides health benefits for all ages by including walking paths, a dog park, and a venue for community events and concerts. And switching over to health concerns, this slide represents one out of the three most important health concerns that that group chose to highlight, which is challenges with safe, affordable housing for people with histories of substance use disorders, criminal legal system involvement, and/or serious mental illness. They're saying the apartments are rented weekly. The conditions are deplorable, but the next step either way from here is homelessness. They are available for a lower amount of upfront expense and are often the only option for people having poor rental histories, criminal records, and suffering from substance use disorders and serious mental illness. This is the second of the three most important health concerns, which is challenges with serving the health needs of people without housing, especially those who may not be obviously unhoused because they're carrying a backpack rather than a cart. They say homelessness is not a crime, and we need to quit treating it like it is. More people in the community are experiencing homelessness than many citizens are aware or can imagine. While this photo demonstrates the issue in an obvious way, the lack of understanding that the people walking downtown, the bypass, or in the county carrying a backpack may also be without housing. Often, individuals are combating dangerous situations, exposure to the elements, and lack of treatment for serious mental illness or substance use disorder, as well as having no resources or support. And then the third of the most important health concerns that they chose to highlight, the connections between the lack of affordable housing, substance use disorder, and criminal legal system involvement. They're saying, we can't arrest addiction. You can't get recovery being locked up. All the people living here under the Washington Street Bridge are someone's child, parent, spouse, partner, friend, or relative. These photos were taken under the Washington Street Bridge, where many people experiencing homelessness live or have lived. The empty Narcan box illustrates the likelihood of people here suffering from substance use disorders, but does not illustrate the number of people in our community who overdose every year. People living under the bridge are often headed to jail or have recently been incarcerated with no place to go when released.
So each of the four groups were asked to develop their calls to action after their work. They prioritized their three top strengths, the three top concerns, and this is an example of a call to action from that fourth Photovoice group. Their call to action was to raise awareness about the extent of homelessness in our community, to continue education and community collaboration to address the issue of substance use disorder and serious mental illness, with diversion being the primary intervention by the court system as opposed to incarceration, and to increase affordable housing, working with local government officials to research development of affordable options for those who cannot afford the increased market rental rates. And what you see here in the photo is one of the community members, one of the Photovoice participants who agreed to participate or to present this call to action on behalf of her group, which is a very powerful part of the incorporation of this method into the community health assessment process. Again, because community members presented the data. It wasn't a health department employee standing there presenting a bulleted list of strengths and weaknesses. And this contributed to the community ownership of this assessment process. So at the forum, we had a movie-sized poster version of the graphic. You saw Group 4's poster. This movie-sized poster brought together the top three strengths and top three concerns across all four groups. Again, the lighter colored backgrounds are the strengths, and the darker color represent the concerns in this kind of quilt-like design. Every group as I said, had their own poster with their top 3 concerns and strengths. Plus, they also had postcards of each of their photo quote combinations. And these were available for audience members to take with them and to share, that represented all of the work that the Photovoice teams created. This slide also lists the issues that emerged as priorities in every group's discussion and in each group's calls to action. So this combines all of their work. So the immediate impacts, we had this first forum in November when a representative from each of the 4 groups presented their work, shared their perspectives and their call to action. Our local newspaper was there covering this forum, and we had great coverage in the local paper about our work. The county judge executive asked that our posters, he be able to take our posters and put them in the courthouse. He wanted people to be aware of the work, and he wanted to use it as a way to promote knowledge of the second community forum that was going to be coming up in December, when we as a community would be selecting the strategic issues from all of this data that had been presented. And then going into that, at that December 14th forum, the posters and the postcards were again displayed and used in that discussion and decision-making process.
Great, thank you. So as I promised at the beginning, in terms of the method, we talked already a little bit about how we attempted to improve on some of the issues around participatory analysis that had been lacking from previous applications of the Photovoice method in terms of its adherence to the original goals of Wong and Burris. And here's how we attempted to address the lack of evaluation around that third goal of actually reaching decision makers to influence action and policy. So we collected feedback to assess whether the project achieved those 3 goals of the Photovoice method that we already talked about, as well as how it impacted the forum conversations from 3 different groups. Of course, from the Photovoice participants themselves, as well as participants in the forum where the presentation actually happened on November 30th from 41 different participants, and then the next follow-up CHA forum on December 14th that Jennifer just talked about here. And we used 2 different evaluation approaches with audience members to generate more robust mixed methods data. So first, in terms of the participants' experiences here, all participants strongly agreed or somewhat agreed using a 5-point Likert scale with the following statements that kind of operationalize those different definitions of Photovoice from the literature I talked to you about. The Photovoice project helped me better understand community health strengths and concerns in Clark County. The Photovoice project made me think more critically about how and why Clark County has specific concerns and strengths. My group members and I were highly involved in the Photovoice topic development and discussion process, and my group members and I have been empowered by the Photovoice process to take action to improve community health in Clark County. And this is one of the photos here. And something I should highlight as well, one of the ideas with the control of the different levels of disclosure is that some of the group members could say, hey, I want to go up on a stage in front of my whole community, say my name and say that I'm a participant in the Photovoice project, and publicly share the results as an identifiable Photovoice participant. Other folks might not want to have that level of disclosure. So in some cases, this person that you see with the red tunic on didn't want to get up on stage, but she was happy to stand near the products of her group's work and have informal kind of tabling conversations about that work. And then there were members of the team who decided not to attend the forums at all. So you have all those different levels of disclosure that we decided upon during the action planning stage, where everybody's voices and perspectives were represented, but everybody also got to determine their level of identifiable disclosure in the forum process. So other quotes that we saw here from folks, here are some representative quotes demonstrating the impact of the project in engaging non-local health department staff in the CHA activities. And these are just really cool quotes. I love qualitative input generally, but some of the things that they have to say here are really impactful. I think the photos showed proof of the strengths and concerns. It wasn't just somebody talking about them, the citizens actually saw them. And this goes back to what we talked about with Wong and Burris and the original method in Yunnan, China. It wasn't just someone talking about them, the citizens actually saw them, that kind of documentary quality. I can have an impact in improving the health of my community. And there are lots of caring people in Winchester and lots of people in need, right? Those concerns and assets. Scouting for photos got me involved in thinking about Winchester in a unique way, and then sharing my work and discussing it, as well as the work of the others in the group, helped me feel more involved in improving my community and helping others. And then someone else said I was impacted by how all 4 groups identified the same or similar issues, which is really helpful in the CHOP process when you're sorting through mounds and mounds of data and those bullet pointed lists that Jennifer was talking about. What do we actually want to focus on? That consensus and convergence was really important, and is also, of course, a TCOM value, as we know. And then finally, having the visuals and story together helps understand the issues more than a bullet point. Yeah, absolutely. So again, getting back to some of the limitations in the literature around how exhibits and sharing of the products have been evaluated, we were able to collect demographic information on who attended that first forum here. And I won't belabor going through all of the different points here, but you can see that breakdown, 41 participants, and the range of different organizations represented here. Everything from Clark Regional Medical Center to some of our behavioral health providers to the Clark Community Services that we heard about earlier, elected officials, the Community Foundation, the faith community, of course, the Department for Public Health, Parks and Recreation, all of the fire and police departments, everybody was there. And then with the first forum, in addition to that demographic data, we used a brand new scale. And remember, I was talking about the critical consciousness construct. There is a new quantitative scale that's been validated called the critical consciousness scale, developed by Orsini, Ewald, and Strack, measuring whether forum participation increased awareness of and intentions to act on community health issues. So if you remember when we were talking about kind of the 3 areas that critical consciousness raising is theorized to address: emotional engagement with health issues, cognitive awakening, and understanding of root causes of community health issues and intentions to act here. What we found was that paired t-tests revealed non-significant small differences between pre and post measures in those expected directions, increasing those constructs. But one of the, this says, non-significant. And a key observation here is that the relatively high pre-test scores indicate that this audience was already aware of and engaged in community health issues. So if you think about, who attends a community health forum, it's folks who might already come in with a pretty high post score. So this scale may be limited in detecting post-event changes if you're talking about a group of already engaged audiences members, where we might kind of have that ceiling effect there, or a floor effect. You could think about it that way. So that's just a little contribution to the literature of measurement here with this critical consciousness scale. So with the second forum, we wanted to bring in more qualitative feedback here. And you can again see the demographics of the folks who participated, 35 folks here, lots of different representation across the organizational board involved with the second forum. And so for this forum, what we wanted to know was one of the other key kind of ideas from the literature is that Photovoice is a form of vernacular or common language. So it's, we can present it in these formal kinds of exhibits, but really Photovoice should be circulating the vernacular throughout the community in different kinds of forums. So what we saw with the survey here and asking people whether they had seen the products before, they'd never seen the products, or if they'd seen or heard about the Photovoice work in another way, we saw the majority, 70% almost, had already seen or heard about the Photovoice product, which indicates the success of the project in circulating findings among community members, beyond the ways that we had structured that dissemination. So we asked about here, because Photovoice wasn't, there wasn't a Photovoice presentation during the second forum. We just had those products and folks who may have seen them before. We asked what impact, if any, did the Photovoice project have on today's community forum discussions? Folks said qualitatively, I think it was great for folks to see parts of Winchester they may not have been aware of, homelessness, transportation, and services. And of course, that's, this triangulation of different angles of vision that we get to see from bringing together so many different points of view. And specifically, it informed the way the audience engaged with issues of built environment. This audience, in addition to what the participants said earlier, they found it also interesting and inspiring that the same issues were identified across all groups. Another audience member said it brought a personal impact to the issues or concerns our communities. Our coworkers and families are dealing with some of the same concerns. And another person said it provided a foundation for facilitating and organizing discussions. And then finally, I really love these last few ones here. It was an eye-opener, right? You think about that visual metaphor. It was an eye-opener for us with the struggles of drug and alcohol in our area. And then the cause of our title here, it's a visual aspect of our community. A picture is worth 1,000 words that brings the community to life. So Jennifer is going to talk to us a little bit about the continued impacts of the Photovoice project, and then Stacy's going to tell us about what she's doing on the scholarly front with disseminating this to academic audiences. Take it away, Jennifer.
All right. So, I mentioned just a few minutes ago about this higher level of engagement in the community assessment process and this kind of transfer of ownership of this process from the health department to the community. It was very rewarding for those participants in the Photovoice project for me to see them standing up there talking about their findings with passion, and to hear someone stand up and say, this is not what I see when I walk out my front door, but I realized that everybody doesn't see what I see. And that's more powerful coming from the community member than from me as the nurse administrator at the health department. Also, as a result of this project, a project participant became empowered to take action. She approached the local school board about starting an equity coalition to address the racial disparities in educational proficiency. And that coalition is continuing to work and develop and grow. A project participant also presented the completed project to the Winchester Comprehensive Plan Committee and the community members that were attending. So this was another parallel process that was going on in our community at the same time. And it just so happened that one of their initial meetings was just after we had completed these forums. So one of the members took this work and was given time on the agenda. And the members of that planning committee talked about later on their use of these photo quote combinations to inform the establishment of their priorities for our city's comprehensive plan. The postcards have been used to educate public health students through the UK College of Public Health Bachelor of Public Health capstone course. So the professor that used these had the students gather data about the community, and they talked about what they saw in that data, and then they looked at the Photovoice project and talked about how they saw the community through a different lens than they did through the numbers that were reflected just in gathering the statistics. And then also Margaret and I had the privilege of presenting this work at the Kentucky Public Health Association meeting in April, which has led to more Kentucky local health departments seeking to incorporate this work into their local assessment processes.
So as Dr. McGladrey mentioned previously, I spent this summer on a thematic analysis of the transcripts, the postcards, posters, and some of the image quote combinations that we shared earlier alluded to some more underlying themes of behavioral health governance. So many participants also spoke about frustrations regarding government non-responsiveness, and that was juxtaposed with some of those discussions I shared earlier, highlighting the strengths of community resources and partnerships that live in the grassroots and nonprofit sector. So here on the slide, starting out, when the public sector doesn't provide sufficient support or services, we have individual, more boots on the ground, grassroots efforts emerge as a result to fill that need with a more, quote, do-it-ourselves ideology. But yet that still leads to this over-reliance on partnerships to bridge that fragmented continuum of care. So even if you do have really strong community resources and really strong community partnerships, a system that's built by service users who are trying to plug in all these gaps still remains very fragile, even when the services are, or especially when services are dependent on things like soft money funding or partnerships, which we know is quite often true in nonprofits or grassroots organizations. So we kind of get into this cyclical pattern where despite these really passionate grassroots efforts, we still need that centralization piece with the public sector. And this isn't a matter of public versus private versus nonprofit, like which is better, which is the answer, but rather our study calls for a reevaluation of current behavioral health infrastructure and highlights the need for improved multi-sector collaboration, improved integration, and really just reconsidering the distribution of responsibility across sectors. I did see someone in the chat say homelessness is a societal failure and needs to be addressed with systemic solutions. And that's 100% what we're trying to get at as well. And now we know, like, it's not just health departments or other professionals saying this, right? It's the community themselves that are telling us this too. And so we are currently in the process of writing up the manuscript that's expanding on this. There is a special edition of the Journal of Behavioral Health Services and Research in 2024 that Summer Research Institute fellows like myself were invited to submit to. So we'll be submitting to that next January, which I'm very excited about.
I am too, Stacy. Thank you so much. All right, so we have a few minutes for questions. So feel free to put those out in the chat. If you have the capacity to unmute, I don't know if that is allowed on our YouTube platform, but please go ahead and put any questions out in the chat here for me, Jennifer, Stacy, or on behalf of our participants. We'd love to hear your feedback also. As you're thinking of those questions, please know too that, of course, this is going to be recorded on our TCOM YouTube channel. So if you have any colleagues who weren't able to join us or friends who weren't able to join us, you can share that recording, that link with people, and or please go ahead and like and subscribe our TCOM channel YouTube. Thank you so much, Kenneth. Oh, you're so sweet. The work is worth much more than 1,000,000 words, which are needed now. Oh, yes, let's amp that up. JL says, it seems like younger people are very inclined to photo document everything. Is there generational differences in the use of Photovoice? That's a really interesting question. What we found, and as you look at our demographic data, Jennifer and I had anticipated maybe we would hear from folks, oh, I need some help with a digital camera. I need some technological support, especially among older participants that we might have involved. And we even had like a sign-up form where they could say, hey, I need tech support with all of this. And maybe it's just the pandemic where we all were, having to up our Zoom competencies and all of this kind of thing. But what we found is that people were pretty technologically savvy users. And what, I think back to, Wong and Burris doing this work in rural Yunnan, China, 30 years ago, where they're having to teach people how to use cameras. That's such a powerful aspect of Photovoice now, is that everybody is a documentarian. Everybody has a high-powered camera with them all the time. So let's use that, right? Yeah. So yes, a lot of information to absorb. Of course, we're looking forward to talking more with a Youth Time Banking Global on Friday about potential partnerships. That's as absolutely kind of the digital communication. It really is kind of conducive to this, and I'm excited to work with more young people to think about how we might think of, use social media dissemination channels to share these products. Thanks everybody for your kind messages out in the chat here. Jennifer, Stacy, any final words you'd like to share before we close out?
I would just say that, I hope to be able to incorporate this process in the next update of our community health assessment. I think it will be very powerful and informative to compare the findings of our community from this past year to 5 years from now, which will be a very interesting discussion points, I think, if we're seeing the same things that haven't changed, or if we're seeing improvements on what we found and new issues arise.
How about you, Stacy?
I think, sorry, I was muted. I think what's most exciting to me is, I have these like broader questions around how can we not fix, but improve public health. And I think there's a lot of consensus around these big things like multi-sector collaboration and integration, but it's quite difficult to tangibly reach those goals. And so that's what makes me really excited about like Photovoice and CHA-CHIP and kind of those things integrating, because they're two things that we know already exist, and like there's a method for actually tangibly and explicitly integrating that. And I think that's what's most exciting for me.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Jennifer, Stacy, for all of your work, and to all of you for your attention today. Please like and subscribe, share this with colleagues and friends, and we'll see you next time on What If? And we'll have some information here popping up in a second on the blog as well.